Good morning, Mr. Shapps. Now, you've got a special role as Defence Secretary in today's rituals. I just want to ask you the same question I asked Yvette Cooper. Why do you think that this set of rituals still has relevance to us?
Well, not least because there's still conflict going on in the world. We've all seen what's happened, not just in the Middle East very recently, but of course for the last year and a half in Ukraine. And I think it affects people because we understand that freedom is not free, that people lose their lives when there are these wars. And today, as with yesterday at the Cenotaph on Armistice Day, we'll be laying wreaths to remember the tremendous ultimate sacrifice that too many people have given for the freedoms that we enjoy today.
One of those freedoms is, of course, freedom of expression, and some people exercised that yesterday, I think mostly in a good way, some in not such a good way. The Prime Minister called yesterday's demonstrations, or some of yesterday's demonstrations, disrespectful. Would you rather that the pro-Palestine demonstration had not taken place this weekend?
Yeah, I think it would have been preferable, if I'm honest, if this weekend had been entirely one about remembrance. It's a solemn occasion, it's an opportunity to reflect, and noisy demonstrations don't help people do that. So I think it would have been preferable, of course. But I also respect the right of people to demonstrate. It is literally what, my grandfather and my great uncle and many, many others in this country went and fought for, with the freedoms to be able to do and say these things. There is a limit, and that's where people breach the law. I was here in Whitehall yesterday, and unfortunately hearing from some of those extremists who were here purely to disrupt proceedings, purely to cause problems, many of them arrested. And then, of course, on the marches, some people there with banners, some people shouting things which clearly breached the law as well. But it is worth saying, the vast majority of people this weekend will be doing what we're doing here, which is remembering those, the war fallen, those who've risked and lost their lives in some cases.
I was there too, Mr. Shapps, and I saw exactly what you've just described. But it sounds from what you've just said that actually you agreed, leaving aside the language and the timing and all of that, but you agreed with the substance of the Home Secretary's case, that actually this was not the weekend for this demonstration.
Yes, I think that's right. I think on balance, decorum this weekend would have been the best route through, but it is undeniably the case that we live in a democratic free society, and actually part of what people who've lost their lives fought for was the right and ability to protest. That is not the same as the right and ability to abuse the police or to break the law or incite racial hatred, of course.
And Mrs. Braverman's supporters this morning are saying that actually what happened turned out to be exactly what she predicted. 126 people arrested, most of whom were far-right hooligans. Michael Gove mobbed on his way back from his constituency. She's got a case, hasn't she?
Well, as I say, I think this weekend of all weekends would have been preferable to focus on remembrance. We saw that incredible Festival of Remembrance televised last night. We've seen what happened, at the Cenotaph, with people laying wreaths and remembering people who've suffered. I think it would have been better to focus on those things. Unfortunately, there were people who were just set on going in a different direction. As I say, as long as it's legal, that's fine as well. It's where it's illegal that it does need to be prosecuted, and people need to be.
Well, you say it would have been better to
know that there are limits.
You say it would have been better to focus on those things, but you weren't helped by your cabinet colleague, the Home Secretary, with her article, which drew attention to the right and some would say encouraged Tommy Robinson and the EDL gang to turn up. The truth is, last weekend, you had Labour on the ropes over their divisions on Gaza. This weekend, Mrs. Braverman has turned the fire on you, hasn't she?
Well, forgive me, tempting as it is to get drawn into the politics of who's up or down one weekend or the other between political parties. I'm more interested
You're
today
a politician, Mr.
in
Shapps.
remembering
That's
people.
your job, isn't it?
I am, but I'm also Defence Secretary, and the nation is coming together today in particular to remember those who've given the ultimate sacrifice. That's why I'm here today, not to really discuss the politics of who's up or down one weekend or the other.
My question is exactly that. It is your colleague who turned this into a political question, when she accused the police of playing favourites when it came to protesters. Based on what you saw, you are out there, I was out there. Did you see the Metropolitan Police playing favourites yesterday?
Well, look, unfortunately, the police have to respond to whatever is in front of them, and I want to pay tribute to the police and, in fact, all of our civilian services as well as the armed forces this weekend. Part of what we should be remembering this Armistice and Remembrance Sunday. But it is the case that some people just turned up determined. By the way, nothing to do with what the Home Secretary said in terms of having already said they would be here doing these things to disrupt things here at the Cenotaph, but also, I'm afraid, elements joining to celebrate what terrorists have done, Hamas have done, and chanting clearly racist things, all of which,
had nothing to
needs
do
to be prosecuted.
It's had nothing to do with the Home Secretary's article this week. But by the way, just quickly, I noticed that you've been profuse in your thanks and, as it were, congratulations for the police. Was it just an error that there is nothing in the Prime Minister's statement about yesterday that thanked the police?
Oh, no, just to be clear, the Prime Minister will speak to the police constantly. I think he's meeting with the Met Commissioner.
But he didn't say
recently
thank you.
And will again.
Didn't say thank you, Mr. Rowley.
Well, I think it's starting to sort of pour over every single word. Of course, the Prime Minister is grateful to the police. We all are.
Prime Minister.
We see what they have to. Yeah, I mean, it goes almost without saying, but I'm sure he'll say it in person. It goes without saying, the police have to do an incredibly difficult job. I do think it's amazingly important that where people transgress the law, not just the thugs, the football hooligans, the extremists that turned up around here and elsewhere in London, but also those who freely go out and chant racist, anti-Semitic remarks designed with swastikas, designed to scare communities. Each of those need to be arrested and prosecuted and feel the heat of what they've done. I know when I was battling with Insulate Britain, who kept disrupting the transport system, it wasn't until I got injunctions in place and people spent time in prison that it stopped. And I think everybody wants to see that action as quickly as possible.
Look, Mr. Shapps, I don't want to bang on about it, but let's just go back to the Home Secretary's article. What she described as a hate march was never going anywhere near the Cenotaph. She knew that. The number of arrests, as it turned out, was pretty small, mostly thugs of the EDL. The Home Secretary was not acting as a peacemaker here. She was an agent provocateur, actually.
Look, first of all, you talk about the number of arrests. That's because the police, as they rightly say, were here dealing with with violence, and that moved them away from being able to deal with the main march, where there were certainly plenty of people chanting in a way that would doubtless breach the law. I know the police have put out requests for information and are finding people who were holding up banners which support a prescribed terrorist organisation.
You and I were both there. We saw the people involved. I mean, I can show you the footage that I took on my iPhone if you want. And we know that many of them were only there because this had been created as an item of controversy by your colleague. Are you guys not going to take any responsibility for this?
Look, again, I repeat the point. I mean, of this weekend, of all weekends, I'm here to pay my tributes to the men and women who have bravely given their lives, and I wish we could spend more of this interview on that. I know you want to talk about these other matters. Those people who were going to come and try and disrupt this weekend had already said they were going to do it. They were doing it in their own twisted way because they were protesting themselves against other marches.
You
ask about the number of... just let me make this one point. You ask about the number of arrests. I'm sure there are far more arrests still to be made from the march that took place yesterday, simply because either the police were distracted here or because they weren't able to intervene immediately. And certainly that was the impression I got, in fact, when I spoke to the Met Commissioner last night at the Festival of Remembrance. He made that point clear to me.
My last go, because I do want to ask you a couple of questions about in your role as Defence Secretary, but, some of your colleagues are saying, and these are not, wild men and women of the left or right in your party, but mainstream members of your party are saying that what happened here is the Home Secretary, instead of stopping the boats, which is her job, has spent the last week creating trouble for your party, for your Prime Minister, for you personally. These are not words that you would have used. What have you got to say to those who are saying that the Home Secretary really should no longer be in that post, and that we hear some of them are saying that if there isn't a sacking, if there isn't a reshuffle, they will resign? What will you say to those people?
Well, quite simply, the makeup of the government, the makeup of the cabinet is entirely a matter for the Prime Minister. He will decide that in his own time. I've already discussed it, I think, in significant length. I don't agree with your interpretation of all of this. These marches were already going to happen. This counter protest was already going to happen, and actually, it is the case that we want to see arrests and prosecutions as quickly as possible.
When I'm here next week, will the Home Secretary still be Home Secretary?
Well, look, as you know, and I know well, a week's a long time in politics, and I never make predictions about these things. As I say, it's entirely a matter for the Prime Minister. Today, though, really ought to be, and I wish we'd spent more time talking about it, about the ceremony we're at here and across the country, where people are remembering people who've laid down their lives and helped to protect this country. And that is what this weekend is really about.
Well, I absolutely wish we could have spent more time talking about that, but of course there will be full live coverage on Sky News, which you and others can watch. We are talking about politics, but I just want to, before we leave, just remind everybody that there is something going on elsewhere in the world. A major hospital in Gaza yesterday closed down because it had run out of fuel. No baby units, no intensive care. President Macron's called for a ceasefire. What is our government saying to the Israelis about this?
I say to the Israelis, both privately and publicly, the same thing, which is they have to make sure they take every step possible to protect the civilian population, observe international humanitarian law. But something that we all know from when London was bombed in the Blitz, from when we bombed Dresden, for example, is that sometimes civilians get hurt in wars, and Israel has been attacked. Unlike in the Second World War, where that bombing was indiscriminate, Israel are going out of their way to try to protect civilians, making extraordinary phone calls to people to ask them to help clear areas where they know that Hamas are hiding in that network of extraordinary tunnels under the ground. If that attack, that terrorist attack a month ago, had been on Britain, and 1,400 Brits had lost their lives in this country, the idea that we wouldn't then pursue the terrorist organisation when we knew where they were, and that anyone would tell Britain that we shouldn't do that, I think would be rather improbable and extraordinary. And I think, therefore, Israel do have a right to do that, but they must try to protect civilians. We support pauses in this action, not least so we can get our own aid through. I've been sending military aircraft out from Brize Norton with aid to the Palestinians. We want to make sure that all gets to the right place. But calling for a ceasefire is in effect to say, don't worry about going after those terrorists, and that is in effect to say it will all happen again, because tens of thousands of rockets and missiles are still underground in Gaza and will surely be used if Israel was to simply stop their current action. So I think it's unrealistic to say ceasefire, pause, yes.
Grant Shapps, thank you very much. I think this is probably the first time I've ever interviewed a cabinet minister with Bach singing Bach in the background. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.